Happy Sunday, wine lovers! It's Stephanie Miskew, certified sommelier and author of the blog, The Glamorous Gourmet, and welcome to my weekly Facebook Live show, Wines of the Week. I'm usually here with you every Friday at 5 o'clock, sharing wonderful wines you won't want to miss. But thank you so much for joining me on a special Sunday edition of the show. As I mentioned in the promo yesterday, it's been a crazy week. So anyway, I appreciate you taking the time on Sunday to join me instead of Friday. So thank you very much. I'm so glad you're here. And on this fabulous Sunday, April 15th, I'm going to be talking about Italy's island wines, specifically wines from Sicily and Sardinia. And, you know, for a while, especially Sicily, was an area that produced copious amounts of wine, but not a region that was known for producing great quality wine. So, but luckily there's been a change in that trend, and there's some really exciting wines coming out of these regions, and I'm really excited to share them with you today. And I really can't think of a better way to kick off the second week of Italian Wine Month. Last month we did Campania, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, so today we'll be focusing on the wines of Sicily and Sardinia. And I'm so excited to jump in and tell you all about these regions. So if you want to go ahead and let me know where you're watching from in the comments section, or throw up some emoji love, I would greatly appreciate it as I go through our super simple format. Just for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, same format every week, super easy. Each week I taste through 4 of our featured wines. As I'm tasting through the wines, feel free to ask questions, make comments. We can have a conversation about wine. That's what makes this so incredibly fun. And again, this is your question safe zone. No judgment, ask whatever questions you have, and I'm happy to answer them for you. I like to keep these around 30 to 40 minutes. I know it's the weekend and it's precious time. So again, I just want to get you excited about, you know, empowering your palate and enjoying wines from really wonderful regions. So, and if you happen to be watching this video after the live broadcast, no worries. Please go ahead and ask questions and make comments as if you were watching it live. I promise to get back to you. And yeah, and I appreciate you watching. So let's see who's tuning in today. I see a few. Oh, Laura, great to see you, my dear. Oh, so appreciate you tuning in today. Hold on, let me get this figured out. There we go. Now I can see who's in. So thank you for watching. Great seeing you this week too, I might add. That was a very nice lunch. And anybody else who might be tuning in, go ahead in that comment section, let me know where you're watching from, or again, if you have questions or comments about everything, just fire away. Oh, and Roland is there watching from Ocala. Awesome. Great to see you. So glad you could join us. And it looks like it's going to storm here in a minute here in Florida. I don't know if it's going to up where you are, Roland, but I think we're in for a little bit of rain, which I can't think of a better time to open some great wine. So in any event, let's go ahead. And again, if you're just joining us, I'm Stephanie Miskew, and today we're kicking off week 2 of Italian Wine Month with Italy's island wines. We're talking about wines from Sicily and Sardinia. So, all right, folks, put on your seatbelts. Let's get started. So I thought we would start with the wines of Sicily. Again, Sicily is Italy's largest island, and it's funny because you wouldn't, you know, it's an island after all, but amazing amounts of wine come out of Sicily. Jancis Robinson said, as much wine as Australia, Chile, and Bulgaria put together. That's how much wine comes out of Sicily. But like I said before, while for a very long time, none of it was very special, there's been a really exciting revival of the region as kind of a fine wine producer. And there's some really interesting grapes coming out of the region. And they're also, you know, implementing better fermentation techniques and just kind of upping their game all around, which makes it even better too. And like we talked about last week with Campania, that has so many exciting indigenous grape varieties, these regions do too, but they are also blending in some international varieties, which I think has helped to up their game. So for instance, in addition to these indigenous grapes, like for whites, we're going to be talking about Inzolia, Catarratto, and Grillo. They'll also blend in a little Chardonnay, and for reds, they're bringing in some Pinot and some Cab and things like that. So it makes the wines, you know, a little more appealing, I think, to a broader audience. But in any event, they're very exciting wines, and I hope this episode encourages you to want to try them. So let's see. So Sicily is home to many really amazing indigenous grapes. As I mentioned before, for whites, we have Inzolia, Catarratto, and Grillo. And we're going to kick off this tasting with our Inzolia. And if you think of it like this, I like to compare these grapes you've never really heard of to grapes you might be more familiar with. So if you want to think of Inzolia as kind of between your Sauvignon Blanc, which would be more of a Grillo grape, and Chardonnay, which would be more of your Catarratto grape. So we're kind of really in the middle with this wine, and I think it will appeal to a broad variety of palates because it's got that beautiful acidity that your Sauv Blanc has, but it's got a delicious roundness to it and beautiful flavors that might be more typical of Chardonnay. But anyway, it's bigger than the sum of its parts. So let's go ahead and jump in. Our first wine is the Buccetti, I think is how you pronounce it. Let me see. Oh, hey, Jen. Good to see you, lady. The Buccetti Marina Insolia. It is an IGT wine, which we'll get into momentarily, from Sicily. It's a 2015 vintage. Cute label, huh? Cute label. And you can even see by the color of the wine that it's different than anything you're probably used to drinking. But the beautiful thing about all of the wines I'm showing you today is they're all $20 or under, which is fun when you're exploring a new region. You're not sure if you're going to love the wines. Who wants to take a big risk, right? So all of these are very user-friendly, and honestly, it's hard not to like these wines, I gotta say. But all right, let's go ahead and let me pour myself some. That's a good place to start. And again, this wine, it's 100% Inzolia, again, is the name of the grape variety. And that's another thing that sets these wines apart from a lot of wine regions in Italy or Spain or France. You do see the grape variety on the labels of these wines. So that might make it a little user-friendly as well. So it's 100% Inzolia, aged entirely in stainless steel, so it preserves the crisp, fruity characteristics of the wine. And let's go ahead and jump into our tasting. For those of you joining me for the first time, I like to do the 6 S's. I think it's 6 S's of tasting. We have see, swirl, sniff, sip, savor, well, and then savor or spit. The last one you get to pick. Professionally, I always spit the wine out, but because it's a weekend, I'm savoring. So our first S, again, is C. And as I like to say, those of you who've been watching for a while already know, repeat it with me, there's so much you can tell about a wine by the color. And right away, if I were looking at this wine, I'd be scratching my head a little bit because you can see it's a deep straw yellow kind of golden color. This does not look like many grape varieties we see in the States much. Unless it kind of looks like an older, like an aged Chardonnay. That would probably be my first guess. But again, the color is quite unique. Anyway, but again, it's fresh. It looks fresh and young. There's no browning. There's nothing floating in it. It looks clear. So I would proceed to our next 2 S's that I like to pair together, which are, say it with me, swirl and sniff. We swirl to once again crank up the aromas on the wine. So when we sniff, we really get a good sense of what the wine is about. So pardon me while I sniff the wine. Yeah, that has got a beautiful nose. It's got nice intensity to it. I can smell it right off the bat. Beautiful notes of citrus and specifically lemon, like the zest of a lemon. But it's also got notes like if you were peeling a yellow apple, like one of those apples that's yellow, if you were peeling that, the smell of the skin of the apple. God, that's really what it smells like. a little hint of nuttiness too on this wine that I like. Like, I'm intrigued. If I didn't know what I was tasting, I'd be scratching my head, but like, I can't wait to taste this wine. So now I'm gonna roll into sip and swish. I like to swirl. If you can tell, I'm a compulsive swirler. But now it's time for sip and swish. I do my swish dance while I'm swishing. Now, I always like to tell people you got to swish the wine around your mouth because it really gives you a better sense of the wine's texture and what it's all about. So that wine has beautiful acidity, as I might have expected from smelling it, but gosh, on the palate, that wine is a beautiful roundness. It just kind of coats your palate. Gosh, it's beautiful. Again, it's like lemon curd, notes of lemon curd. Again, that yellow apple, like you just bit into a ripe yellow apple. It's got, again, a little bit of that floral thing going on too. Some definite pear on the finish, and that lovely kind of nuttiness too, like almondy kind of finish on the wine too. So very unique. I can't really, now after tasting it, I mean, it's somewhere between Sauv Blanc and Chard, but it is a wine unto itself. It's very unique, very enjoyable. And again, $14 a bottle, folks. And like I said in the promo yesterday, I did do the legwork. These wines are available locally in your retail stores. So, or if they don't have it, ask them to order it. That's something a lot of consumers don't know you can do. Request a wine and see if they can get it in. But again, this is a beautiful, again, it's a Buccetti, I think, Marina Insolia from Sicily, 2015 vintage. Just a beautiful little white wine from Sicily. So, any question? Oh, Heidi. Hey, lady. Yeah, similar too. Again, it's between that Sauvignon Blanc and that Chard. But again, very different because it's got those notes of the yellow apple and the pear and that nutty kind of characteristic. That's just really, really cool. So definitely seek it out. And again, I will post all of the names of the wines in the show notes that I'll post tomorrow, I promise. I know I've been bad about that with everything going on, but I promise to get that to you because these wines are awesome. Any questions about our first wine so far? And again, this is your safe zone. Ask away. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Awesome. Oh, and who's that? Laura asks, like an Albarino. You know, it has the acidity of an Albarino, but I want to say it's a little fruitier than an Albarino. And again, it has that like nuttiness on the finish that makes it kind of different. Whereas an Albarino is more floral, I think, floral and fruity. This is kind of nutty and fruity. I don't know if that sounds like a dig, but it's actually really good. Oh, Roland says, yes, we've had several thunderstorms today. Yeah, something's rolling in about now. So anyway, any other questions as I take another sip of our beautiful Insolia? All right, guys, let's move on then to our second wine from Sicily. And for each region, I have a white and a red. So the next wine we're gonna try is, from Sicily, is our red. It is the Cusimano Nero d'Avola. Let's see if I can flip that screen for you. The Cusimano Nero d'Avola, estate bottled. It's a Terre Siciliane IGT, which is a classification. It's the same classification actually as the white wine. They're both IGT wines, which means they fall out of the exact specifications, but that's generally only because they haven't updated them recently to include wines grown above a certain altitude. Because as we talked about last week, in order to be classified as a DOC wine, these wines in Italy are governed by actual wine laws that are very strictly enforced. We don't have that here in the United States, so it's a little different way of thinking, but it was mainly put in place to preserve the tradition of certain wine regions. So if you go outside of those traditions, then you make an IGT wine, which is something that doesn't fall directly within the laws. That's how Super Tuscans were formed. We're going to talk more about that next week, actually, Super Tuscans. But these wines are both Terre Siciliane IGT because their vineyards are at certain altitudes that aren't included in the actual law. And those laws can tell you what altitude you can grow the vines at, which grapes you can include in a wine, the percentages, how long you have to age a wine before you can release it. So it can get pretty nuts. But again, it's all in an effort to preserve that tradition. So again, we have the Cusimano Nero di Avola. It is the 2015 vintage, so a nice youthful wine. And Nero di Avola, again, is the name of the grape. And Nero di Avola happens to be the signature red grape of Sicily. Generally, that is the red you're going to find at your local stores. However, there are other fabulous red grapes, which I'll get into in a minute, but that's the one you're going to see the most of. Hold on, I just want to make sure not to leave that out. Yes, also known in Sicily, Frappato and Nerello Mascalese. You got to say that with the hand. Are two other reds you might possibly find, but this one, it's hard not to love. And the Cusimano brothers have been making wine for a long time. They're very well known in the region for working with these awesome indigenous grape varieties. And yeah, they just produce some very, very delicious wine. Wait, I had a note to myself here. I'm trying to figure out what I was trying to tell myself. Oh, man, I'll get to it later. So let's jump into our tasting. Now, Nero di Avola is a grape known for producing wines with kind of intense tannins, and it's a wine with intense color. So these are kind of bigger, bolder wines, yet they tend to have enough fruit that makes them very enjoyable as well. Sometimes, like our Cherasi last week was a little bit more austere, I want to say. Some people were trying it, just sipping it on its own. And with a lot of Italian red wines, it can be a little off-putting when you're used to the fruitiness of, say, like California wines. But the wines from this region, because it's warmer, and this is the point I knew I was making to myself here, because these wines are from a region that's warmer, they have riper fruit, so they're a little more user-friendly. Like, you could just sip this wine. It is quite delicious. And on that note, let's jump into our tasting of it, shall we? So again, I'm gonna give it a little swirl. You can see the color. It is a deep purplish color. A hint of garnet, but I wanna say this wine is pretty much just purple deliciousness. There's no way you're reading through this grape or this wine. And that just means that the grape skins are very thick because they gave a lot of color into this wine as the juice macerated with the skin. So yeah, you're not reading through that wine. And what does that tell us? That tells us the wine might be a little higher in alcohol and it might have more tannin to it. And also maybe a little more personality. So let's go ahead and swirl and sniff. So again, I'm seeing the legs coming down the sides of the glass, which don't tell us too much, but it could be a clue that the wine is a little higher in alcohol. So, all right, let me roll into the sniff part. Oh, man, that is just delightful on the nose. Again, very fragrant. That's a sign that it's from a little bit of a warmer region too. But again, dark, ripe fruit jumping out of the glass, but with a little dusty, earthy thing going on. That's just, it smells heavenly. So now I'm going to roll into sip and swish. And again, you just got to swish the wine all around your mouth so it coats all of your flavor receptors. I mean, that is just juicy and ripe and delightful. You've got dark ripe cherry, plum. There's a little savory herbal delicious thing going on there too that's just nice. The tannins are, I'd say these tannins are more medium. They're a little more tame than other Nero di Avolas I've had. You can expect kind of grippy tannins. This one is very user-friendly. I mean, you could just sip this on its own. Of course, it would pair beautifully, gosh, with a wide variety of food, including pizza, you know, pasta bolognese, anything like that would be delicious with this. But very user-friendly, whereas some Italian reds can be, and as I like to repeat time after time, Italian wines are meant to be enjoyed with food. If you think you don't like Italian wines because you've just tried it on its own, you throw a dish of pasta or a steak in the mix, and those wines literally transform before your eyes. So, but this is the rare exception that I could just sip this wine all day long. That is delicious. And you know why? Because it is 100% Nero d'Avola, and it is fermented entirely in stainless steel. There's no oak on this wine. That's why you don't have the grippier tannins that you would usually have. It's just aged on the lees for 5 months, which enhances the mouthfeel, makes for a creamier mouthfeel. And I'll link up more detail on that in the show notes if you want it. But that's why this wine is a little tamer, but still very delicious, ripe, juicy, dark fruit, and just makes you want to smile. So, and let me, do you have any questions? Feel free to bring on the questions. And Mimi says, like, can you smell the heat? And if by that you mean, am I getting the alcohol in this wine? I'm not. The alcohol is only 13% on this wine, so they did a beautiful job of balancing the fruit and the alcohol. Because sometimes when you have a fruity wine or from a warmer region, you know, you can feel that heat when you swallow it. You know, it's like that burning sensation in your throat. I don't get that at all with this wine, at all. It's very beautifully done. In fact, let me take another sip. Just to be sure. Yeah, it's a beautiful finish. It hangs out for a little while, not incredibly long, but no heat. I'm noticing no alcohol, and I didn't chill the wine or anything. So yeah, just a really, and it had, this really cool glass stopper you don't really see much anymore, which I thought was pretty cool. But if you are not going to finish the bottle, I'd stick a cork in there rather than, I don't know if this one would really keep it as well as putting a cork back in would. But so any questions about our delightful Cusimano Nero d'Avola from Sicily? Again, $12 a bottle, folks. I mean, the values from these regions are like crazy. Okay, so I think I answered your question. Yeah, maybe nicely balanced. That's exactly what I would say. Just delicious, pleasant, you know, delightful. Delightful, delightful. Any other questions before we move on to Sardinia? I know, these wines are fun, folks. I'd love it if over the next week or so, if you end up sampling one of these wines, come back and tell me about it. You can message me privately if you don't want everyone to see. I'm happy to get back to you, or post in this, you know, on this post and let everybody know what you're trying. That just, you know, that makes wine fun. I like to hear the things that you discover. You know, we're all in different parts of the country, and we all have access to different things. So feel free to do that. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the wines of Sardinia. I also wanted to check in and say, if you are just joining us, we are talking about Italy's island wines today. We just covered the wines of Sicily. We did the beautiful Bucecci Marina Insolia white wine and the Cusimano Nero d'Avola red. And now we're moving on to the wines of Sardinia. If you're watching this after the live broadcast, please go ahead and ask questions and make comments. Bring them on, folks. All right, so now Sardinia. Sardinia, whereas Sicily is the first largest island in the Mediterranean, Sardinia is the second, and it lies between Corsica and Sicily. Like Sicily, thank goodness, the region is showing real potential and determination for producing high quality wines now. And again, they have, Sardinia was actually under Spanish control for a very long time. So a lot of its grapes are actually native to Spain, but have now are doing their own thing in Sardinia here. Our first wine, again, is a white, like I promised. It is the Cantina Dolia Nova. It's their Dolia. That'd be funny if it was the Dolia Insolia. It's the Dolia Vermentino di Sardegna. This is a DOC wine. In fact, these two from Sardinia we're going to try are DOC wines. It's a 2016 vintage. Cute bottle there. I'm not against a cute bottle. But again, and Vermentino is the signature white grape of Sardinia. So that's probably one you're going to commonly come across. If you're in the store and you ask them, where are your Sardinian wines? You might get a funny look, but I find most wine stores do have at least a bottle or two from both Sicily and Sardinia. And again, if they don't have it, ask them if they can get it. You know, that's always a possibility. So, and And the Cantina di Dolianova was established in 1949. Next year, they're celebrating their 70th anniversary. And again, their goal is just to promote the traditional winemaking of Sardinia, which was established over 1,000 years ago. That's how long they've been making wine in these regions. I mean, that's something we're not used to here in the U.S. You know, our wine history started, you know, a couple hundred years ago. These regions have been making wine for ages and ages. So that's part of what makes them so interesting, I think. And then a group of wine growers ended up turning this into a cooperative of growers who now kind of unite to produce these beautiful wines. And now today, Cantina di Dolianova is the largest winery in all of Sardinia. So again, we have Vermentino, which is our signature white grape. It loves the granite soils, which are perfect for growing it. Vermentino in general is characterized by being very crisp, very lean, very an acid-driven wine. You know, you won't get the roundness that you'll get, say, with the Insolia. So if you're more of a Sauvignon Blanc fan or perhaps Pinot Grigio fan, it might be more for you. But let's go ahead and roll into our tasting. Uh-oh, I knocked something over. Anyway, so you can see right away the color is not quite as deep as our previous white wine. It's a little lighter, but there's still some color there. It's more of a lemon yellow. I'd say it's less golden. But again, there's no browning. This again is the 2016 vintage, so it's fresh and young. All of these wines you want to get while they're, you know, I wouldn't buy any of them over 4 or 5 years old. These are all meant to be drank pretty young. Not that there aren't others that you can hold on to, but these, especially the whites, get them while they're young. And again, there's no browning, nothing floating in it. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll into swirl and sniff. Yes, and right away that's different from our previous white. This one is more clean citrus, definitely more acidity, and definitely a nice floral note going on too. Wow, that's really beautiful. Yeah, it just smells clean and refreshing. Again, this wine, it's 100% Vermentino, fermented entirely in stainless steel, so there's no oak influence on either of these wines. So I'm gonna roll into sip and swish. The swish dance. Yeah. And that, again, it's very much on the palate like it is on the nose. Crisp, clean, refreshing, but with this beautiful floral finish. Wow. And as I've said many times before, I'm a sucker for a floral wine, whether white or red. Wow, that is so pretty on the finish. But yes, just clean notes of almost like a saline aspect or a fleur de sel aspect to it too. And citrus. And yeah, that beautiful floral note and beautiful acidity. You could this is perfect for sipping on its own. You could pair it with shellfish or a lighter salad, or like a grilled lighter fish. I wouldn't go with anything heavier. It might kind of might overwhelm the wine, but man, it's a beautiful, beautiful white. How many of you out there have ever had Vermentino? Anybody? Anybody? Bueller? Anybody ever try Vermentino? If you have, you better tell me. Or any wines from Sicily or Sardinia by any chance. I'll give you a minute to respond as I take another sip of our delicious Vermentino di Sardegna. And again, this wine and our next wine are both DOC wines. So that means they fall within those parameters of the law that dictates what a wine has to be. And for this particular DOC, it stipulates that it can apply to both still and sparkling white wines. They both must be at least 85% Vermentino, and they must be at least 10.5% alcohol, at least for the still version of the wine. So again, you have to fall within those guidelines. Otherwise, you have to be an IGT wine, which means you're an outlaw. No, you're not an outlaw. You're just playing outside the rules or of the tradition. So, but again, and other white grapes you might encounter from Sardinia are Malvasia, Nasco, and Nuragus. But my bet is you go to your local wine store, you're going to come across a beautiful Vermentino, and they're only DOCG, which is the highest level of classification. They only have one. It's Vermentino di Gallura. and you might pay a little more, but it probably won't be too crazy expensive, and it might be something really fun to experiment with. So in any event, oh yeah, and Roland says from Sicily, yes, Moscato di Pantelleria, delicious, sweet dessert wine, yes. Beautiful, and gosh, and there's other wines from these regions too that are so much fun. Sicily is also home to Marsala wine that we cook with, and that some of us are familiar with. But that's even one that's worth getting a little reacquainted with. It's a fortified wine, but it's very delicious for sure. And Heidi says she loves Vermentino. Cheers to you, lady. And Laura, never tried them? I think you're really gonna like them. Yeah. I'm going out on a limb, but I know your palate pretty well. I think you're gonna like these wines, especially the white. So, all right, let's jump into our final wine of our tasting today, and our second wine from Sardinia. I keep mixing up Sicily and Sardinia, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job so far with you guys. So the second wine from Sardinia is the Argiolas Costera Cannonau de Sardinia. Again, it is a DOC wine from Sardinia. It's a 2014 vintage, $20 a bottle, folks. I think this is our most expensive wine. Remember this name, Argiolas, because you're going to probably see that. It's one of the most common wine producers that we're seeing in the States now, and they produce just beautiful examples of, I actually have another one of their wines, Monica is the name of the grape, that's also delicious. But I only taste 4 wines in the show, but maybe I'll mention it later on this week. Again, the winery was founded in 1938. I almost forgot to pour myself some. What's wrong with me? Founded in 1938, and they are the foremost wine estate on the island of Sardinia. And again, they focus on those native grape varieties that, I mean, why wouldn't you? They're so special. They really are. And let's see. Yeah, it's the second largest island. I think we covered that. Now, Cannonau is the Sardinian name. It's what they call Grenache or Garnacha in Spain. But this particular grape, the thing that you might have heard of it, you might have even seen it on a show like 60 Minutes or Dateline or something like that, because Cannonau has been associated with longevity. In fact, on the island of Sardinia, they have one of the highest life expectancies in the world. And many native Sardinians kind of attribute that to the wine, and specifically this red wine. Cannonau has very thick skin, so it contains loads of anthocyanins and resveratrol. And yeah, it just has a reputation. If you wanna, and it says they live about 10 years longer than almost anywhere else in the world. So let's all get together and have a Cannonau party. But again, it is I think it's a different clone than, say, Garnacha that you have in Spain, because it has been found to be different in regards to the, I think, the amount of those chemicals that the grape has in it. But again, because it has thicker skin, it produces like deeply colored wines that usually have tannins that are a little bit intense too. So definitely want to put Cannonau on your shopping list. And again, that is the name of the grape, Cannonau de Sardinia. And let's dive into our tasting. All right, so right away you can see it looks similar to our previous wine, the Nero di Avola, but I think this wine is a little more garnet in color. It's not quite as purple as our Nero di Avola. It's purplish garnet. Again, it is the 2014 vintage. Yeah, so I think it's a year older, but that shouldn't make a difference. It's just a matter of the grape. And Grenache in general is usually more red fruit and a little more garnet in color. So, but again, it looks fresh, it looks young, there's no browning, there's nothing floating in it. This wine, 13.5% alcohol, so just 0.5% higher than our previous red as well. So now I'm gonna roll into swirl and sniff. Yeah, and that is, that's nice. Off the bat, it's more of an earth-driven wine. I'm getting like a beautiful earthy note, but also some ripe red fruit as well. And ironically or strangely, usually raspberry is not usually the first red fruit I get when you're talking about wine, but this wine, like on the nose, it's like this beautiful dusty, earthy raspberry note going on. So let's see on the palate what we get. I'm intrigued. And again, you know, it's fun to taste these wines. They make you want to compare it to something you've had before or something you like. But, you know, at the end of the day, they're all very different from anything we're used to drinking here, like your Pinot Noir or Cabernet, or they're just, yeah, on the palate. Beautiful. Again, wow, beautiful. That raspberry, that cherry, notes of rose petal, as well as a beautiful minerality. One thing I haven't mentioned about both of these regions is that they have a lot of volcanic soil. And in this wine, I felt like I could really almost taste it. It has a beautiful minerality going on there that kind of translates to that volcanic thing. But that on the palate is beautiful. It definitely has that earthiness, but to balance it out, again, beautiful raspberry, rose, beautiful minerality. I mean, that is just a beauty of a wine. The tannins are a little grippier in this one, but still not overwhelming. Again, you could easily sip this wine on its own or enjoy it with food. Yeah, a nice acid too. Whenever you have a wine that's high in acid, that immediately means you should be pairing it with food, or that wine is a great food wine. So, and in fact, if the acid seems a little too much, as can be the case with many Italian wines, that is because, as I like to say it with me, Italian wines are meant to be enjoyed with food. So try some food with that wine, and I guarantee it will transform into something fabulous. So again, any questions? Oh, let's see. Oh, Mimi asked, is this one aged in steel? This one is actually aged in a little bit of neutral oak, Mimi. That is a great question. It is 100% Canna now. Hold on, let me see. Yes, there is some oak on this wine. Not much. Again, I think it's more neutral oak, but yeah, and there's nothing overwhelmingly oaky except that the tannins are a little more, you know, a little more there. But not overly oaky, you know. So if you're somebody who tends to get the headache thing from red wines, these would be good ones to try because there's not a lot of oak treatment, and that can be the trigger for a lot of those red wine headaches. I will link that up too in case you suffer from them and you might be joining us for the first time. I got lots of good information on that for sure. But great question. Oh, Nancy, there you are. Hey, lady. She's having a Pinot now. Excellent. You know, the more I'm enjoying this wine, it does have kind of notes of a Pinot, although I want to say it has even more complexity. It definitely has that cherry thing going on, but it's just the raspberry and like the rose petal thing. I love it. I want to like dab it behind my ears too. So I had to take another sip just to be sure. But yes, Mimi, it is healthy. So Canna now, yes, that is the longevity grape. It is known to, that the people of Sardinia swear by it. So who am I to tell them they're wrong, right? Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. Oh, Nancy, you get white wine headaches? That's from the sulfites. Wow, you're one of the rare people that gets white. How did I not know that? That's funny. But I'll link up that article. It'll explain all that. And we don't care if you're late to the party. You're welcome any time at all. We're happy to have you. Yes, Laura. Laura is like me. You like to try everything, you know? I mean, you can appreciate wines for what they are, even if they're not necessarily your favorite. It's still fun to explore. You know, you kind of educate your palate. I think you define your palate as much by what you don't like as by what you like. So that's why I always say the best way to learn about wine is to taste everything. If you're drinking the same thing every day, day after day, or when you go out to a restaurant, you're not, you know, developing your palate to its full potential. So try new things, you know, use your server or your bartender, your sommelier as your guide. Tell them what you're used to drinking, and maybe they could turn you on to something cool like this that's a little off the beaten path. But again, so our next, any questions about these wines before I start talking about next week? Anyway, so let me just to recap. We had our first two beautiful wines from Sicily. We had our Insolia from Bucecci. We had our Nero di Avola from Cusimano. Beautiful Sicilian wines. Then from Sardinia, we had our beautiful Cantine di Dolianova. We had our Vermentino di Sardegna. And for the red, that was our white. And then we had the Costa Sera Cananao di Sardegna was our red. So pardon the hand. Kevin's really, that's your fault. So he's one of my favorite wine educators, but he's always doing this. And it helps because then just the names can be a little intimidating. And anyway, especially when you're ordering a wine somewhere new for the first time, just have fun with it. But again, I will put all of this up on the website. I promise. These are so fun. And again, none of them are over $20. Our last wine, the Cannonau, $20 was our most expensive wine of today's tasting. So, but again, thank you to all of you for joining me today for week number 2 of Italian Wine Month. We covered Campania in week 1. We just did the Italian islands of Sicily and Sardinia in week 2. Next week, I'll be back with you on Friday, April 20th, talking about the wines of Tuscany, which I'm really excited about. That's where I personally fell in love with wine. And then the following week, I'll be talking about the wines of Piedmont, which are, very classic, very beautiful wines. Again, it's all good in Italy, let's face it. And we're gonna have some fun. So I hope you can join me for the rest of Italian Wine Month. And if you think of any questions from here on out, feel free to message me or leave a note right here in the conversation on this video, and I promise to get back to you. So again, thanks for taking some time during your weekend to join me for our tasting today. I so appreciate it, and I look forward to being with you again next Friday. I promise it will be on Friday. Okay, so take care, and I will see you soon. Cheers.